Welcome back. Now, MTN is another company to reckon with on the stock market. We've seen stock for MTN come from over 200 shillings since their IPO down to over 160 shillings in this year 2022, and then come back to 180 and then 185 and climb as high as 190, and at some point we even reached 195. Yesterday, well, the stock went down again from 187 after the daily gain of Wednesday of about 2 shillings from 185 down back to 185. Let's take a look at how this particular stock has been performing as well. Now, MTN stock, as you can see there, I've said it began its initial public offer with 200 shillings. And that date, the graph there begins at exactly 6th December when the company got listed onto the Uganda Securities Exchange. And you can see a very, very sharp decline there from 200 to over 160 back there in around the month of March and between the month of Feb and March. And later on, there was a slight increase in prices up to 180 Ugandan shillings, and then a few fluctuations later on, and leveling off at between 180 and 200, and then a little less than 180, and then later on we see that the prices went back up to 185. So we are still seeing the same story here on the yesterday's market. After MTN lost 2.46 of their price of 187 down to 185 Ugandan shillings per price per share, and that was a 1.31% loss. The MTN company, as I've told you, is the youngest company on the exchange, and we are very interested in young companies like these on the exchange because we see there's a lot of enthusiasm. People are still enthusiastic. Shareholders are new probably to the stock market, and many people would actually be interested in buying such a stock. It trades under the ticker name MTNU, and the ISIN, that is the International Securities Identification Number, is UG0001566, and currently MTN is the second most valuable stock with a total amount of over 4.14 trillion Ugandan shillings worth of shares, which is about 18.5% of the entire exchange. And these, of course, when you get the 4.14 trillion, you divide it by the current price of 185, you come up with over about 22.4 billion shares. Those are the shares outstanding. Yesterday alone, MTN traded about 298,300 shares on the market, and that was about 55.2 million Ugandan shillings worth of turnover for the counter there on the Uganda Securities Exchange. And in terms of total capitalization, we have seen it is at 4.14 trillion. On a weekly basis, if you just counter, probably you look at the price on Friday last week, the company has lost about 0.37%, and nothing really significant for the 1 week loss. But in 4 weeks, we are seeing a gain of 4.29% on the counter for the last 1 month. And in terms of the 3 months performance, the company has only lost 0.01% of their price valuation. And yesterday, it only lost about 1.3%, meaning on a daily, it has lost only 1.3%. Well, in a period of 6 months, they're on a gain of over 1.09% loss there, gain there on the 6 months counter. While in terms of year-to-date performance, they have lost about 5.12%. Because if you look at the price they began this year with a price of 194.99 Ugandan shillings, but have since lost 5.12% off to end the yesterday's markets at 185 Ugandan shillings. And MTN, in terms of volumes, it is the third most traded stock on the Uganda Securities Exchange, and currently ranks, in terms of when you look at the 3 months, you're seeing that they have traded a total volume over 14 million. This is a new company. You're looking at a new company trading within 3 months over 14 million shares within these 3 months that are valued at 2.6 billion Ugandan shillings over the period, with an average amount of about 221,185, and these are the total average shares per session that are traded, and a volume high of 2.11 million shares that was achieved on the 12th of July and the year 2022 within this same period. So meaning we still have activity, we still have a very good performance from the year to date. Much as not that good compared to other stock, but at least for a young company that is just so young, the youngest company on the Uganda on the exchange, you see it's not a bad performance after all. And in terms of these losses, for example, year to date of about 5.12%, still not so bad compared to several other counters like Sipla, several counters like Umeme, which have been there for quite a long time. And this ranks it in the position of number 8 in terms of year-to-date performance on the exchange. You can imagine, out of 17 listed equities, you become number 8 on terms of year-to-date, yet you're the youngest company on the exchange. Quite a good performance there for MTN. If you're looking at also volumes, they are trading good volumes. You see, on a several this week alone, we are seeing that they had 500,850 shares on yesterday, and then they had on the 2nd of August there was 82,500, and then on the 1st of August you're seeing 234,000 shares, and then the week before you're seeing still trade on over 266,225. You see, this is a good activity, a very good counter that can give you good liquidity. That is MTN Uganda. By the way, MTN Uganda is changing leadership very soon, and of course the appointments have already been made. Mr. Wim van Helput, who has been the CEO for the company for the last over 6 years or so, is going to be now going to a bigger position in West Africa, where he's going to be able to manage MTN services in Sierra Leone, in Liberia, countries in West African leg that we are seeing there. And right now they have appointed the Safaricom Sylvia, who is going to come from this Safaricom company, which is doing extremely well there in Kenya, to become now the new CEO, and I think the first female CEO of the company. And we are looking forward to Sylvia to see what she will bring on board. Mr. Wim van Helput has been able to do his best. He has, of course, increased the financial technology core services, because MTN, as you know, is one of the companies that gives you several accesses to financial technologies. And even during their initial public offer, they gave an entirely electronic IPO where people could buy shares entirely using their mobile phone without any paperwork, without having to travel, without having to trouble yourself so much. And I can say Vim has had a very good regime, of course with challenges. You remember that sometime he was deported back to Belgium, and there was but that was entirely outside his work at MTN. So meaning he has done a very good job, and we are hoping that Miss Olivia will pick up from there, and we hope to see a better performance also of this counter on the market. So if you want to access stock on MTN, yesterday they closed at 185, but you can bargain with 189 with 184, you can bargain with 186 because remember we have the 15% window within which we can trade, and this helps us, of course, to be flexible, to be able to look for a very valuable stock for ourselves, and also helps the stock markets to grow. And that was the MTN counter. I'll just summarize the trading of yesterday. Yesterday's trading ended, like I've said, with only about 5 participants who participated in trading. And when you look at the performance of these other stocks, we had Bank of Baroda trading at 85 shillings. He did not trade any volumes on the market, but closed the day with still a market price of 85. We did have British American Tobacco Uganda at 15,000 shillings, and he did not also trade any volumes, neither was there any changes in her price there. We did have also we did have Centum Investment Company at 304.76. It came out as a gainer on the market yesterday. We did have Cipla at 70 shillings, who came out with a loss of 0.83 shillings, who also traded some good volume of 5,400. We did have DFCU Bank closing at 547 shillings, did not trade any volumes, but closed at that particular price. We did have East African Breweries Limited at 5,022.38 Ugandan shillings after a significant loss of 6.17 shillings. We did have Equity Bank Limited, EBL, at 1,546.6 after a loss of about 8.42 on the market, and he did not trade any volumes as well. Jubilee Holdings at 8,110, 8,107.44, closed at that particular price, and then Kenya Airways at 124.7 as well, closed at that particular price. MTN Uganda, as we have already mentioned, at 185, traded the highest volume of over 298,000 shares. While National Insurance Corporation, NIC, at 6 shillings, did not trade any volumes. Nation Media Group at 644.969 was a gainer. And then New Vision Printing and Publishing Company at 155 shillings as well. And then Stanbic Uganda at 21 shillings. And Uganda Clays at 19.0 shillings. While Womeme Limited at 190.0 shillings, traded a total of 14,100 shares. At the end of that particular day, the trading session at the Uganda Securities Exchange ended with 338,100 shares in total that were traded, corresponding to a market value of 59,017,200 shillings. Compared with the previous day of trading, there was an improvement of about 73% decline in volume, a 49% decline in turnover, and also the market capitalization ended with a 22.4 trillion Uganda shillings mark. Performance of the indices was already shared. Of course, the All Share Index went down, and the local company index as well went down with it. That brings us to the end of the market here in Uganda. You can trade on this market, like I said, by simply dialing *165# to open yourself an SCD account. That's the first step. And then look for a stockbroker, and you will be able to do even more with that account. Let's move now very quickly to Nairobi and take a glimpse of the Nairobi markets, how they played out yesterday. Yesterday, Nairobi had about 48 listed equities participate in trading, with over 18 gainers and 18 losers ending the day. The top gainers were led by Nairobi Business Ventures, who led by a 9.71% gain. to end the day with a price of 3.39 shillings. He was followed by Sassini Tea and Coffee, who ended the day with a 7.69% gain. And then BK Group ended with a 5.34% gain, while we had Stanley Fahari Income rate at 4.8% gain in prices. On the losing side, the end of day depreciation of 9.27% to 3.25 Kenyan shillings of Kapchora Tea Company, of course, came down with the bottom at the bottom there in terms of losers. Sanlam Kenya also lost by 4.7%. Liberty Kenya Holdings at 3.7% loss, and of course Safaricom recorded the highest volume of 4.31 million shares within a day, followed by Equity Group Holdings at 2.19 million shares, and while KCB Bank at 1.82 million shares closed also with in the third position in terms of volumes. East African Breweries traded about 600,000 shares as well. Regarding the performance of the all-share index for Nairobi, the all-share index moved up by 1.34 points, and that was a 0.96% points, closing at 141.28 points, representing a one-week gain of 0.57% and a four-week gain of 6.22%. But an overall year-to-date loss of 15.13% on the counter. Other remarkable indices that performed well, we had NSE 20. It tracks the top 20 companies on the Nairobi Securities Exchange at about 0.26% and 2.24% gain on a daily yesterday, respectively. And then we had the FTSE NSE Kenya, also a 15 index, didn't have any changes on a daily, but still witnessing a monthly 18.79% loss. At the end of the trading session on the NSE, Nairobi Securities Exchange, we had 12.5 million shares that were traded on just this single particular day. And these were in about 1,117 deals that were made, and the total amount in worth of these shares was about 453 million Kenyan shillings, which were traded. Compared with the previous day, we see a 19% decline in volume and a 5% improvement in turnover, and a 17% improvement in the deals. The market capitalization of the Nairobi Securities Exchange, however, is at 2.2 trillion Kenyan shillings. That is the oldest stock market here in East Africa, and that is Nairobi Securities Exchange. Remember, through your stockbroker, some stockbrokers have provision of services of these stocks outside Uganda because they have subsidiaries. I'm talking about SBG, look at Quested Capital. They can help you buy stock even outside Uganda, on the Kenyan market, on the Tanzanian market, on the Rwanda Stock Exchange, and so on. So all you have to do is reach out to them and be able to get access to these very, very interesting markets. And in our stories, the headline here, that of course IMF is coming out to say that the tight monetary policies that are imposed by the Bank of Uganda could impact capital markets. Now, the International Monetary Fund has said it is worried that a tighter monetary stance that is held by central banks in advanced economies will impact the capital markets. As you all know, of course, these capital markets depend entirely on probably some of the rates that the banks are declaring, and how people respond depends also on these rates. And recently, there have been, of course, very huge surges in central bank rates around the world. Now, Uganda currently is experiencing high commodity prices, That is no longer news to anyone. And of course, the increase in inflation, which has prompted the Bank of Uganda to raise the central bank rate twice within a period of over 2 months as it moves to control inflation. In its updates, the World Economic Outlook, the IMF said tighter financial conditions trigger debt distress in emerging markets and developing economies. As advanced economies, central banks raise interest rates due to inflation, financial conditions worldwide will continue to tighten, according to IMF. The resulting increase in borrowing costs will, without considering tighter domestic monetary policies, put pressure on the international reserves and cause depreciation versus the dollar, according to the IMF. Noting that such challenges will come at a time when government of financial positions in many countries are already stretched, implying that less room for fiscal policy support, with 60% of low-income earning countries in or at already high risk of government debt distress. And this is exactly true for very many countries here in East Africa. Kenya currently struggling with a huge debt. Uganda here, we are struggling with our 73.2 billion shillings, billion US dollar debt. And of course, these rates for which we are getting money from abroad are increasing, meaning this will affect our borrowing as well. Now, this the IMF noted, whereas an increase in the interest rate rises net incomes, financial institutions are likely to suffer losses as loan origination declines and default rates are rising. Likewise, higher interest rates and lower tax revenues will push some sovereign borrowers into debt distress. Yet, mechanisms to solve debt distress are slow and unpredictable, hampered by difficulties in obtaining coordinated agreements from diverse creditors over their competing claims. Tight monetary policies have resulted into an increase in borrowing costs and a reduction in the tax collection, risking at least 60% of low-income countries into debt distress. The IMF also was able to note that has resulted into a widespread of capital flight as offshore investors seek to invest in markets with high yields on government bonds. And of course, according to IMF, where external shocks cannot be absorbed by flexible exchange rates alone, policymakers should or ought to be ready to act, for example, through foreign exchange interventions or capital flow management measures in a scenario where the situation goes to crisis levels. That is advice, of course, coming in from the IMF. You can follow more of that story on our website at www.smart24tv.com, and of course follow all our channels, all our shows here that are of course oriented to driving business in East Africa. Thank you very much for watching the show. We'll catch you next week, same time, same place. Have a good weekend.